Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and this is going to be my patch 9.2 PTR Affliction Warlock feedback video. Now, over the past few PTRs, I've really just made like one large video in a spreadsheet, which I'll probably make at some point for the feedback. But one large video, really just talking about all three specs, but I sort of wanted to break it down spec by spec this PTR because number one, those videos are sort of long. I want to make them a bit shorter, and number two, I think it gives me a bit more time to just sort of cover more intricacies of the specs, interactions, and just things like that. And with tier gear coming out, it might change things a little bit more as well. Now, with that being said, in the Week Wars profiles add-ons here, you can all grab for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, grab them anytime, feel free to do so. I also want to give one massive shout out to my patrons. Thank you a million times for all support, guys. I really, truly do appreciate it. Heads up, the patch 9.2 Warlock, I guess, spreadsheet slash document will be coming out in the next, I guess, probably a couple weeks or so, give or take, depending when PTR was up and retesting begins. The tier 3 Felguard rank from a Patreon or higher does indeed get early access to that. And also, hey, by the way, I made an Instagram somewhere over here and things. Yeah, so if you want to check it out, feel free to do so. It's some WoW related stuff, some IRL stuff and things like that too. Yeah. So with that being said, let's get into the actual video. Just starting off with, I guess, the basic talents that AF plays and I guess sort of doesn't play and what should change. Oh yeah, and I also forgot to mention quickly before we get into the video, if you guys want to see more WoW content and or help support the channel, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons below. It helps out a ton. And we're once again getting close to the 50k sub mark after the sub-apocalypse a few months ago. So with that being said, let's get into it. So I guess before we jump into the actual talents, we should probably talk about the tier set coming in 9.2, at least currently for Warlocks. So the 2Ps for Affliction, Malefic Rapture damage increased by 15%. Straight up, right there. Number one, very good. And each cast extends the duration of Corruption, Agony, and Unstable Affliction by 2 seconds. Now the actual 4-piece, where are we at here? Well, Agony, Corruption, and Unstable Affliction are active. Now, no, it does not say on your Drain Soul target, so there is that, even though you probably should be draining that target. Drain Soul has a 4% chance, and Shadow Ball has a 20% chance to make your next Malefic Rapture cost no soul shards and cast instantly, be instant cast. So, I'm a big fan of this 2-piece and 4-piece for sure. The dot extension here is semi-relevant. Realistically, AF's biggest weakness right now is the lack of single target that it has. Outside of playing Malefic Wrath and things, right? Because you have very good burst AoE with DSS, and so the seeds and things like that. But we're a bit lacking when it comes to single target damage, and even playing Malefic Wrath, Demo still ahead of us by a decent bit of DPS. But it's good to reference this bonus. Overall, I like it. I think it addresses AF's weaknesses. Now, I don't think tier should address weaknesses for a spec heading into a new raid necessarily, but in the end, it is what it is. We haven't seen tuning yet, but at this current point in time, I'll take it. So getting the talents here, we're going to sort of go through these sort of fast because there's not really a whole lot to say in certain rows. 15 row here, Nightfall, ID, Drain Soul. Realistically, Drain Soul is just the best option here. It's been for a long time. ID has been played on certain fights like Sludge Fists for like the pillar damage amps on Kel'Thuzad, I believe, because you're playing Wrath of Consumption at times in that fight and you can get just big ID drains off. But Drain Soul's just been good. It's just the best thing across the board. It realistically should be baseline. It's part of the spec. But that's a new expansion change, not a 0.2 patch kind of change. The shard sniping you get, the execute you get with Malefic Wrath, Withering Bolt, and other things is very relevant. And the actual channeled periodic ticks add even more value to Drain Soul as a whole. Now, I could see ID maybe getting a tiny buff, like damage amp wise, because like maybe making it a little more relevant, like in council-based settings. But realistically, we've seen it played in certain spots. I think there's just a lack. I think the reason it hasn't been played as much this expansion is because we haven't seen a whole lot of council-based fights. Think back to like, you know, I guess like Castle Nathria. We had Huntsman Altamore, but AF AF was played there. You just played Drain Soul instead, right? And then when it came to Council of Blood, some people played it there, but it was hard to get big drains out on that fight. So like if there's a council fight next tier, like the Dreadlord fight, something along those lines, ID could potentially see play. But I don't know if it's actually like really needs much of a buff. I think it's more of a council, like just a lack of council based fights kind of thing. Nightfall is just fine. It's okay, but Drain Soul's just better, and realistically so is ID. So I mean, tuning wise in this row, I probably don't really want to see a whole lot, just being real. Drain Soul's fine the way that it is, and I don't think this row's really that much of a bad, really that bad of a spot. 25 row, Wrath and Agony, AC, Siphon Life. All three talents here are options. So you play Writhe, spoilers ahead, with Sow the Seeds and Mythic Plus basically all the time. Siphon Life is your single target based talent with, you know, more Rapture value, more Withering Bolt value, more technically Withering Bolt, Malefic Wrath kind of value. It works very well with Af's single target based toolkit, right? If there are council-based fights, like spread council-based fights, for example, during Castonathria, it was mentioned somewhere that Limit actually had a plan to potentially play multiple Warlocks on Sires and Athrius, AC all the adds around the room, and just have AC kill them all, and just fight the boss, right? AC is a very, very powerful talent. Once again, similar to ID, although, as well. We haven't really seen a whole lot of fights where it's really relevant, this expansion, I feel like, right? Partially also because, like, I guess you can sort of say in SOD, AF wasn't very good early on, and if it is, it was more like DSS, so the Seed shenanigans, like on Soul Render or big DSS pad. But regardless, I think this row is all in a good spot. I legitimately do. Writhe is a bit behind Siphon Life and Single Target, which is great. Writhe is a bit ahead of Absolute Corruption and like AoE with STS, because obviously more agony value. There's no reason to play AC when you're spamming Seed. But AC does have that relevancy in certain spots. So I am fine with this row overall. 30 row, defensively, Dark Pack's OP, it's fine. The way that it is, perfect. 35 rows for the Seeds, Phantom Singularity, Vile Taint. I'm actually pretty fine with this row as well. Unfortunately, we can't slow the balls on Painsmith Wrestling anymore with Vile Taint. But Phantom Singularity and so the Seeds both have their own like niche kind of, or I guess their own homes. I don't even want to call them niche. Phantom Singularity is played in the single target build like this. So the Seeds is played with Writhe and Agony in Mythic Plus. There are some weird hybrid builds we've seen in Plus, like trying to play like Siphon Life instead of STS and things for a bit more single target. I don't think they're worth it personally, but both are actually very good at what they do. Another dot, more Withering Bolt value, more Rapture value, more Malefic Wrath value. STS combined with Soul Rot, which I'm not right now, I'm a Necro Lord, and DSS, very, very good AV value. So this row also solid across the board. 40 row, Dark Fury, Coil, Hollow Terror, take Coil, that's it. 45 row, Embrace, Haunt, Grimoire of Sacrifice. So both Shadow's Embrace and Haunt, I think, are fine. Shadow's Embrace duration was extended from 12 seconds, I believe, to 16 in 9.1. But when it became a talent, we got Dark Collar Baseline, which is a 2-minute Dark Lair, which is fine toolkit-wise. Now, damage-wise, it was not an even trade-off. Like, that was definitely a nerf to our damage. However, having both Haunt and Embrace on the same row here means realistically, people are just taking Haunt in most settings. Now, Shadow's Embrace has started to pull ahead of Haunt in single target Malefic Wrath based sims, and I have played with it, and it does indeed feel like it's pretty solid. Regardless, both of these are fine. The thing that I guess the issue that I have with this row, and this is the first row I would like to see a talent change in, is that Haunt is your single target priority effect in this row, right? Haunt, you put it up on your main target, it dies, bang, you move it, right? Shadow's Embrace, you can juggle it in 2 targets. If you're getting really fancy, maybe 3 targets, but realistically 2 with the actual duration increase, and it's not that big of a deal. The issue is Sacrifice is just garbage. I've said it for years. Sacrifice is so bad. You have your single target talent, your 2 to single target, maybe 3 target talent, realistically 2 to 3, and you have this dumpster fire. Like, Hunters and Mages have baseline sacrifice abilities, no water elemental and no pet for Hunters, that give them like flat damage increases or flat intellect increases, I believe, right? Why do we get some garbage whenever it has the chance to proc and do damage? Like, Sacrifice is just bad. It's been bad for a very, very long time, and the only reason it's played on certain fights, like an SOD on Kel'Thuzad, for example, is because pet AI is bad, and our Fell Hunter can't kick from range. So you take you sack your Fell Hunter to kick from range, having the kick bound to you. Sacrifice needs to change. It needs to go back to the way it was, which is like, I think it was a flat intellect increase or a flat damage increase. And following that same ideology, it gives you your single target ability, your 2 to 3 target ability, and your AoE ability. And you probably just play Sack and Plus and have, you know, that extra X% damage, right? Or that extra, you know, maybe they make it like, I don't know, an extra, I don't know. They have to tune it right. It has to be worse than Haunt and single target, most likely. And maybe between like Shadow's Embrace and 2-3 target stuff, but it scales well in AoE or like, you know, council-based settings, right? What I'm getting at is here is the Shadow's Embrace, the random proc is not good. Doesn't scale with multiple targets, and you lose your pet in the pet utility, which is fine if you're playing a sack kind of ability, but it's not an equal trade-off. It's very, very bad. Just please give us the, what is it, Frozen Throne, Lone Throne, Lonely Hunter, Lonely Wolf, whatever the abilities are that mages and hunters have. Just give us that and get rid of this abomination of sacrifice. 50 row here, Conduit, Creeping Death, Dark Soul. This row could see some changes here. Realistically, Creeping Death feels like an ability that was just left there from BFA, and it was like, oh yeah, we don't have time to fix it. It's literally counterintuitive with how AF and like Rapture windows Malefic Wrath and Withering Bolt, how they work. And there's a modifier in here as well to not increase your Agony Shard gen. So you don't get more shard gen, you have to refresh dots more often, which means less time to rapture, less, I guess, harder maintenance of Malefic Wrath, less Withering Bolt value. This is just not a good talent. It's not very good. They needed to find some way to address this realistically. There's a handful of ways they can do it. But honestly, maybe like keep the actual duration of the dots the same as they are, like without creeping death, but make them tick 15% faster. So they actually tick more over the same duration. Now that gets into the territory of, okay, this might be a little OP in like council based settings and stuff, so you have to tune it properly, but in the way that it is right now, it's never gonna see play. It's terrible. And Soul Conduit, unfortunately, just with Dark Soul being as good as it is, big 2-minute windows with Dark Soul, with Orb, with Dark Glare, all that kind of stuff, it's just unfortunately a bit underpowered. It'd be cool to play with Malefic Wrath and stuff, but it's just underpowered. They could maybe buff it. I believe it was 20% a while ago, and then they nerfed it to 15. But even with a buff of 20, I don't think we'll end up beating out Dark Soul. This haste is just so strong. With that being said, let's get into conduits. So as far as conduits are concerned, Affliction has 2 to 3, depending what setting you're in, that are good, and then one that's just basically terrible across the board. But before we get into those, I want to talk about the Covenant-based ones: Soul Tithe, Catastrophic Origin, Fatal Decimation, and Soul Eater. So let's start bottom to top. Soul Eater, Soul Rot's damage increased by X%. I believe are somewhere around here. I don't even know the exact levels of this now, honestly, at this point. I have the highest rank, whatever it is. But regardless, the radius increase is not that big of a deal. It actually is a bit annoying at times because I pull mobs way in the back of a different pack. But regardless, the big thing here is the actual damage increase, because Soul Rot, number 1, deals twice the amount of damage to your main target as it does to the surrounding targets. So that damage increase isn't a single target, it's an AoE, and it's just a strong overall conduit. It makes your AoE based ability, which is once again good in single target and good in AoE, do just more damage. Very simple, so I didn't forget it, but it's just good. It's basically played for Affliction and spoilers ahead, Destruction as well, for Night Fae. Now Demo has just all good conduits, but yeah. Fatal Decimation, Decimating Bolts, missiles damage. I guess missile damage, that should be worded differently, maybe, deals X amount increased damage. So realistically, this thing is fine. It's okay. I believe it gave you a chance to not consume a stack of the whatever spell Decimating Bolt amplified during beta and like 9.0, but they changed it in 9.1. It's fine. Decimating Bolt deals about like, I think 4.5 to 5% of my damage as far as when I'm playing Affliction. Not great, not terrible, but in the end, when you're missing a third good conduit and single target for Affliction, you typically just, defer to Fatal Decimation if you're playing Necrolord. Now, Catastrophic Origin, the Venthyr one, impending catastrophes damage over time, and the inflicted curse lasts 50% longer against your primary target. The unfortunate part is that just impending catastrophe in single target doesn't really do anything. It is a very poor ability when it comes to single target damage. If you're playing the Venthyr Legendary, which we'll get to in a little bit here, that makes it a lot better in AoE. But keep in mind, this conduit says primary target, so the actual conduit and the legendary don't stack with the Covenant ability. Now, the Venthyr ability, once again, we'll get to that in a little while. We're talking Covenant stuff and Covenant abilities. Realistically, I think I don't want to play conduits and legendaries to make the ability itself good. I want the ability on its own to be decent, and then you build upon that, right? This is the only ability out of like all the covenants that doesn't interact with like certain spells that I guess Warlock in general has. Ath has Malefic Wrath, but like you have Scouring Tithe giving you crit bonuses, or Bolt increasing incinerate damage, or UA damage, or Rapture damage, right? Sorry. And this just gives me a huge haste amp, right? But this is just a big ball of goo you shoot out, and just, it does things. But realistically, it doesn't, because it's just bad. So not a big fan of this one. Probably could use like a single target damage buff, realistically, but we'll get to that in a little while. The Soul Tithe Kyrian Potency Conduit. Now, unfortunately, this conduit, unlike the Kyrian Legendary, which I guess we can spoil a bit here. Spoilers ahead if I can find this. The Kyrian Legendary was changed in patch 9.2 or 9.1 to actually now give you a 33% movement speed increase and a 15% crit strike chance increase if Scouring Tithe expires, meaning, hey, the dot fell, the mob didn't die, refresh it. Previously, that second half of like this legendary clause wasn't even on there. So you literally got a big crit bonus increase and big speed increase if the target died. Otherwise, you got actually nothing. They changed this to 9.1 to make legendary relevant outside of just, settings where things are dying, which is very, very good. But unfortunately, they didn't change the conduit. So the conduit literally gives you value. Yeah, whenever a target, whenever it dies, pretty much. Yeah. So the target has to die to get any kind of value out of this conduit. It's just, yeah. There's no, like, if it lives, you get, you know, 3% increased crit chance, right? So realistically, this can be very good in certain settings, but overall, it really doesn't see much play because it's very, very, it's the most narrow conduit of any of the Covenant-based ones. I think they should add a clause to this, like they did Languishing Soul Detrius, the actual legendary. So, getting into the 4 AF conduits, though, you have Corrupting Leer, Focus Malignancy, Rolling Agony, and Withering Bolt. Now, Withering Bolt and Malignancy are your 2 single target conduits. You can see I have Malignancy here, Withering Bolt here. Both of these, this came out incredibly strong during 9.1 PTR. It was nerfed significantly, but it is still your best single target option. Malignancy was nerfed considerably from where it was in 9.0. Even with that being said, it is still better than Rolling Agony and much better than Corrupting Leer still. So these are both fine. I think Malignancy could stand to maybe use get a bit of a buff again to like help address AF's lack of single target and like priority based damage, because like the one target you have your UA on is taking more damage from Rapture and things, right? Because it probably has your Haunt or Shadows Embrace stacks on it as well. I wouldn't mind seeing that change a little bit, because even with the tier set bonus coming in, which is nice, I think AF single target will be good with Malefic Wrath, but outside of it, it's probably still going to be a little lacking still. So I wouldn't mind seeing a bit of a bump to Focus Malignancy again. Regardless, though, these are both fine what they do. Rolling Agony. The duration of your agony is increased by 7 seconds. This is fine. You play it Mythic Plus. You might play it on certain council-based fights if there's a lot of movement or you just, you know, don't want to refresh agony 8 times on 7 different targets. Your agony lasts an eternity. And with your 2-piece coming in that extends agony whenever you rapture, with this conduit, your agonies are going to last a literal eternity. Now, the one conduit here that's really bad is Corrupting Leer. Agony and Unstable Affliction have a 4.6% chance to reduce the cooldown of Summon Dark Lair by 5 seconds. But the problem here is that Summon Dark Lair doesn't do anything. Like, you'll cast it, and it will extend your dots, which is fine, because you can get more Rapture value, you can get more Rapture value, it makes it easier to, like, cast more Drain Souls in a Malefic Wrath window and things like that. But realistically, the Dark Lair itself doesn't really do anything. And unless you can get this to 1 minute consistently, you're not having it. You're losing your 2-minute Dark Soul stink, right? You just have your big 2-minute window with Dark Soul, with Dark Lair, with Ruby or whatever. But instead, oh, I'm playing a minute 20 Dark Glare because baseline is 2 minutes now, so you just can't sync cooldowns. It's just bad. This is the same thing when we had Dark Caller here instead of Shadows Embrace, and at times you'd play it over like Dark Caller. Instead you play Haunt or whatever in this row and play this to give you a 2-minute Dark Lair on certain fights. There were certain fights at the end of, I believe, Nathria, that you would play that to have that 2 to 2 1/3 minute, quarter-minute damage profile, but you still wanted the actual Haunt value. But ever since Dark Caller went baseline, no one's even thought about playing this. There are a couple like small builds that have played it in certain places for 1 minute Dark Lair and plus, but realistically, I don't think 1 minute Dark Lair and plus does much anyways. It's a cool little trick. It's cool. I played it before, but it wasn't good. It was okay. Leer just needs to be redesigned. I don't know what they want to do with it. I think it'd be cool to actually maybe make it like, say, your Dark Lair does X amount more damage to whatever target has your UA on it, right? Number one, that would address the actual issue with Dark Lair, because Dark Lair I-beam damage, I don't know what this even is. But Dark Lair I-beam damage, you can see here, is about 2.5%. I have no idea why multiple specs are mixed in here, but regardless, whatever this is, I-beam damage is terrible. It is very, 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 very bad. So having a conduit like this, which number one, maybe addresses like, okay, or changes your Dark Lair, maybe it makes either your Dark Lair like AoE I-beam on every target that has agony on it, not corruption because it'd be too easy to apply with seed, or maybe it does more damage to your UA target, your main target, right? It probably would be played in most settings over like Fatal Decimation or Soul Eater, because it has that relevancy in basically every single setting. But in the format it's in now, Corrupting Leer is just not good. I think it's sort of a 2 birds 1 stone thing if they change it to maybe like increase Dark Lair's overall damage. Because hey, look, in the end, when my main cooldown is doing 2.5 to 4% in Mythic Plus over the course of a whole run, it looks like this was probably that. I know that it increases dot damage, or dot duration, but it probably still needs a bit of help. So Leer needs to be redesigned. Focus Malignancy, Withering Bolt, Rolling Agony, all fine though. So redesign Leer, This needs to be changed to something similar to Legendary, give you like a third of the value if you actually, if it expires. And yeah, we'll get to the Venthyr thing. So a hot topic in 9.2 Legendaries, because we have two that we can wear. Now, one is obviously the Covenant-based one, whether you're playing Shard of Annihilation, Decaying Soul Satchel, Languishing Soul Detritus, I'm sorry, or Contain Perpetual Explosion, which is interesting in itself. You will still be playing one at this current point in time, Affliction-based Legendary. Now, the only ones of real relevancy right now in most settings are Malefic Wrath and, well, DSS, so, which is one of your Covenant-based ones. Now, you can still play Synergy. You can still play Wrath Consumption. And there are certain fights in SOD, like Kel'Thuzad, where you see Wrath played a little bit with Writhe and Agony, because you can chain that actual buff for a very, very long time. There are a lot of Legendaries for AF, like Wrath, like Sacrilash's Dark Strike, that can be very strong in certain settings. Now, Sacrilash was buffed in 9.1 from 15% to 25%. Damage-wise, and they removed the baseline slow. You have to apply Exhaustion and then apply Corruption to have the Exhaustion buff refresh, or it's a pain. But in rating, the real relevant part here is the 10% increase to damage. Now, similar to how we talked about with Absolute Corruption in Inevitable Demise, there hasn't been a whole lot of council fights this tier, right? Think back, I don't know, what raid? Back to Taurus, Veilhounds of Sargeras. It's okay, maybe it's a bit old. What other fights were there actually? Let's see here. Back to BFA. Council-based fights, Conclave of the Chosen, even though half them healed, right? We haven't really seen a whole lot of council-based fights this expansion where you can get that AC value, that maybe that ID value, but realistically, that corruption 25% increase value, right? Because if it's a fight where boss health doesn't reset, having that permanent corruption dealing 25% more damage from the actual legendary, and then, oh yeah, 15% more from this while juggling rides or whatever and doing other things is actually really, really strong. So I don't think Sacrilash is like a bad choice or anything at all. It's probably fine the way that it is, but it's like for council-based fights, but it's not like the go-to legendary that I want. So I think this is fine, TLDR, so I just want to summarize that. Malefic Wrath is the one I would like to change a little bit. Now, the baseline duration of Malefic Wrath, I believe, was 8 seconds in 9.0, and it felt miserable to maintain. It was increased to 10 seconds in 9.1. Even with a lot more haste and things, it's maintainable. It definitely is, but it is a very, very punishing playstyle if your Malefic Wrath debuff drops, because you want to, if you're Necrolord, to maintain Malefic Wrath for pretty much the entire duration of whatever encounter you're doing. If you're Night Fae, you want to have your 1-minute Rapture windows with Soul Rot and things, so you have to like juggle 3 stacks of Wrath, let it drop, Rapture back to 3, and if that drops, you're punished a pretty good bit, because you can't really stack back to 3 instantly, because you're sitting on like 1 shard, like maybe 2 shards depending on RNG and things. But you can't, okay, I messed up, Rapture 3 times, I'm back to max stacks. It's very, very punishing on like movement-based fights where you have unplanned, like if you get targeted with a mechanic, for example. I would love to see a duration increase on Malefic Wrath from 10 seconds to like 12. I think it would go a very, very long way, and I don't think it would make it OP or anything. It wouldn't make it so it's like, oh, this is just, you play this everywhere. Because Malefic Wrath is a single target-based legendary. It's good with Drain Soul, it's good with Withering Bolt, it's obviously just good in single target, but you wouldn't play it Mythic Plus over something else. I don't know, maybe like Synergy, or maybe even like Wrath Consumption. It's single target based, right? And that's all that it does, right? It's good at it, that's all that it does. And it's very, very, very unforgiving. I've played unforgiving playstyles before, it's fine, but I think Malefic Wrath, based around like how those, I guess, playstyles and builds have felt, is probably on the one of the most, if not the most unforgiving effect I ever played with. I think a duration increase to 12 would be more than fine for Malefic Wrath. Not a whole lot else here. Wrath is fine at what it does. Sacrilash is fine at what it does if it's like relevant in certain settings. Wilfrid's is garbage because Dark Lair is garbage, obviously, for AF. Demonic Synergy is actually fine. It might actually be played with like DSS or Shard or whatever next patch, depending on what fight you're on, right? Because you're going to have one baseline Covenant legendary like Shard, DSS, whatever, what have you. Synergy is like probably the second legendary I'd be looking at, unless you're in like a niche setting like where Wrath or Sacrilash is good. If you don't want Malefic Wrath, but AF is still the choice for whatever reason, Synergy could definitely make a comeback. And it was played in Castle Nathria more than fine. The reason it's not played now is because AF sort of sucks. They nerf the crap out of its single target. And DSS makes AF good at AoE. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Synergy come back. I think it's fine. Even Perpetual Agony is fine the way that it is, just sort of underwhelming. I wouldn't hate seeing the increase of the charge in here, but realistically, Perpetual Agony sort of makes it like it seems like you want to play it in certain settings where like I'll have multiple targets active, right? But at the same time, like you can't always leverage all the extra charge of coming in a 3+ target setting with Perpetual Agony on. Like Council of Blood was a great example. People thought this would be a great legendary for it during beta testing and early, like late PTR stuff, I guess. But in the end, you played Synergy because, well, for a few reasons, but you couldn't juggle the extra charge that were coming in. You just literally couldn't rapture enough in between globals and refreshing dots and everything else. So it's actually not as good as people think it is. Only real thing here, like I said, I would love to see a duration increase to Malefic Wrath. I don't think it needs a damage nerf or anything, just an actual duration increase. And depending on what you play next tier covenant wise, Shard Violation, increasing Drain Soul damage with all the synergy that has, or DSS for huge like Drain Soul amps and crit amps and whatever. Even like Languishing Soul Detritus could be really, really good with this, but I would love to see actual duration increase. When it comes to Covenant abilities, I feel like they can only be so interesting, and I'm gonna be honest, all the lock ones are not like, I don't know, to me, incredibly flashy. Some of them are sort of cool, but like compared to other classes, they're sort of But in the end, at least personally, what I care about more is the actual tuning of them and damage and what's good. So I guess bottom of top here again, because Night Phase, sure. Night Phase Soul Rot. We talked about these a bit already. Doing more damage to your single target, your main target has Soul Rot applied to it, and less facilities and bits to the surrounding targets is good. It gives Soul Rot a bit of a better single target base profile. Just a good all-around ability. Good in single target, good in AoE, and hey, you get Soul Shape to go with it. Now, we're not really going to cover these because they're universal, but hey, it's Soul Shape. We have to sort of make, some note of it. So, Necrolord Decimating Bolt stuff. Now, this is an AF video. We're pretty much only going to cover AF here. It gives Drain Soul 1 charge. Now, during beta testing of Shadowlands, it gave Drain Soul 3 charges, which was incredibly punishing to play with. Now, you had Shadow's Embrace as a baseline ability, not a talent, and with like, I don't know, 12% haste, it made trying to maintain Shadow's Embrace, all your dots, everything else, dumping shards, and getting 3 full, uninterrupted, unclipped Drain Souls off a literal nightmare. So I think it's very good. Reducing the actual stat count from 3 to 1 is fine. For a while, I made a case about trying to like give Decimating Bolt 2 stacks to Drain Soul, but with the actual Affliction Warlock APLs for Necrolord being improved over the past few weeks, I was talking to a father-daughter about it who worked on those, who worked them out. My Affliction, my Malefic Wrath, Necrolord Malefic Wrath, there's so many like terms here. Necrolord Malefic Wrath Sim is, I think, like 50 DPS higher than my Night Fae Malefic Wrath Sim, which is pretty interesting. But you have that insane single target like, execute based profile, right? You have Withering Bolt for the actual damage amp. You have Drain Soul, obviously being Drain Soul, and you have Decimating Bolt increasing Drain Soul's damage baseline. And when the target's lower in health, Drain Soul's damage amp is increased. And when the target's also below, the increase to Drain Soul is given to you by Decimating Bolt, which increases in like scaling damage depending how low the target is. And when the target is below 20%, Drain Soul baseline does 100% more damage. Plus, you also have other stacking effects, Shadow's Embrace, Haunt, whatever, what have you, and potentially Shard of Annihilation next patch in 9.2 as double legendaries. Decimating Bolt is actually like I've grown to love Decimating Bolt, Drain Soul, Malefic Wrath interactions, all that kind of stuff. So as far as AF is concerned, I'm fine with it. I wish it was maybe a bit more mobile, but realistically, that's just sort of how it's designed, and I don't really think there's much you can really do with that, because you can't really like clip a drain or anything unless it gave like periodic ticks of it being buffed. It's fine the way that it is. So we'll get to this last. Scouring Tithe. It's fine. It's okay. It's another dot effect, which is up a pretty good bit of time in single target. If you're in like a fight where there's ads dying, things like that, as Affliction, there might be certain settings where you might want to cast the Tithe on an ad that's dying, dump your shards into Raptures, and then hey, you have 5 shards back, and you can just go again. It's okay in single target. Once again, it's fine. It doesn't really bring anything crazy with it though, because like looking at how like Night Fae is with Soul Rot, you have DSS, Decaying Soul Snatch with the legendary, right? That gives you that haste amp and that crit amp when you cast your Soul Rot. But Scouring Tithe, the legendary, and the actual Conduit, they don't give any value when you cast it. It either has to kill a mob, or I guess the mob has to die with it on it, or it has to expire, and then you get the actual amp. So you can sort of wait for those points to start rapturing and things like that for a bit of extra value, but it's fine. It's okay. It's sort of like a set it and forget it kind of thing. Sort of bland in single target. It's another dot, but not as impactful as Necrolord or Night Fae for AFs. I guess like toolkit, right? Now, Venthyr, you can hear the sigh, right? So, Impending Catastrophe calls forth a cloud of chaotic anima that travels to the target, dealing shadow damage to enemies in its path. When the anima reaches the target, it explodes, inflicting that's weird wording, either Curse of Weakness or Curse of Tongues, and dealing shadow damage as a dot over 12 seconds. Realistically, this ability is just not very good in single target. It was buffed and nerfed, I think buffed again and then nerfed with like 2 hours before Shadowlands went live. Like legitimately, the day it went live, they nerfed it by like a significant margin when it was already terrible. It's just not good in single target. As cool as the actual curse part of this ability is, I feel like a lot of the ability's raw damage and I guess DPS relevancy is like sort of like traded off for this curse effect, which like once again it's cool. It's cool to launch a huge catastrophe in AoE, which albeit with legendary is actually pretty good in AoE, but the curses I don't think they really matter as much as Blizzard thinks they do. Because like in the end, like you're not seeing World First 31s playing a Venthyr lock. Oh, we got to play them for the weakness and curse applications in AoE or we're gonna die. Like that's not really it. Now obviously there's more to it than just that, but the curses are cool, but I don't think they're as relevant as they maybe thought they would be. Now what I could see with this ability is like in single target is give it the soul rot treatment, but with a bit of a clause to it, or a bit of a change to it, right? So soul rot deals more damage to the target that you cast the actual soul rot ability on, and like less to the cleave based targets, right? Make Impending Catastrophe, because it's not target capped, right? It might be like 20 or something like that, right? But make it so that if Impending Catastrophe only hits one target, it deals like 200 or 300% more damage, something along those lines, right? So if it hits 2 targets, okay, well that's just the way that it is, right? Maybe you're playing legendary, so it hits harder, right? Maybe if you're playing it in like 5 target settings and you're playing legendary, you don't get the 300% damage increase. But if it hits one target, have it do a lot more damage to it, because it hits your wet noodle. Even with the actual like damage amp to rapture and things, it's just not good in single target. It's sort of like a soul rot kind of like middle ground, but I think it would go a long way for it, because Venthyr is like the one covenant for lock. It's just like not really been good in any setting at all ever. With legendary it is, but I don't want to have to play legendary and a conduit to make my ability good. I think it should be good on its own and then enhanced further by those abilities. So yeah. And now we did talk a bit about the actual tier set already in a couple other videos, and sort of sorry this video a bit just to highlight what it does. I do think like there could be one small change made to the actual tier set that would make it a lot cooler and probably a bit more relevant, right? So the 2-piece, once again, Malefic Rapture's damage is increased by 15%. Flat. Baseline. That's good. There you go. Number 1, it helps address Aph's lack of single target, albeit most of, like, if you're playing Malefic Wrath, the majority of your damage is not from Malefic Rapture. It's from Drain Soul. But still, a baseline increase to Malefic Rapture's damage will indeed help with Aph's single target, whatever build you're playing, right? And each cast extends the duration of Corruption, Agony, and UA by 2 seconds. Now, there's no Phantom Singularity, there's no Covenant ability, and there's no Siphon Life mixed in here. I think that's actually a good thing, because if Siphon Life was mixed in here, you just play Siphon Life on like council-based fights if there are any, and just like rapture everything and never have your dots fall. It will get really excessive. So I think it's a good idea not having Siphon Life in here. The thing that I want to talk about a bit, and I think Shelly mentioned this a bit too in his video about tier when it came out, is that the 4-piece, right? Well, Agony, Corruption, and UA are active. Your Drain Soul has a 4% chance, and Shadow Ball has a 20% chance to make your next Malefic Rapture cost no soul shards and cast instantly. Now, this is a cool ability, and Malefic Rapture does have obviously a single target relevancy and AoE relevancy, right? Even though it might not hit as hard as a City Corruption playing So the Seeds, because you're probably going to have Corruption, Agony up on multiple mobs. That's basically it, right? One has UA on it. But I think it would be really cool to actually have it give you either a Malefic Rapture or a Seed of Corruption cast, cost no soul shards, and be instant, because it's not procking like out of nowhere, right? I'm not going to be spamming Seed. Oh, I proc a Seed, go. I proc 2 Seeds in a row, go. No, you get the proc when you're channeling Drain Soul or casting Shadow Bolt, which is not like a part of my AoE rotation, right? I'm casting those when I run out of shards in AoE, and I'm just like, all right, I'm filling, or I'm sniping. I'm trying to snipe shards from one mob, right, to the next, and for the next pack, right? And once again, casting that Rapture, you'll cast it, obviously in AoE. It's instant cast, it's free, you'll do it. But I think it'd be really cool to have it sort of give an instant cast Seed for free too. It would sort of fit like, hey, you know, two different builds of AF, one being like more single target based with Siphon Life and PS, and one being more AoE based, so the Seeds and DSS. Now AF is pretty good when it comes to AoE and burst AoE now. DSS, so the Seeds, obviously very good, but there are classes in the game that are better than us at it for sure. One was uncapped. Windwalker Monk is utterly broken, and I mean, I'm not saying Lock's not broken in AoE either. It's decent, but I don't think realistically that would make that big of a difference when it comes to this tier bonus, like in a bad way. It wouldn't make it too broken or anything, right? I think it would go a long way in like making the actual spec feel a bit more fluent in both settings, right? I don't think it's really like adding that bonus in doesn't really make it OP or anything like that. But both these pieces, the 2-piece and the 4-piece, baseline rapture damage, dot extension, and the actual like just proc of Malefic Rapture for free, even if you don't get the actual C clause on it, both are good. Helps address AF's lack of single target damage a bit. And once again, in the end, if there are council fights next year, dude, double legendaries, like AF could be a literal powerhouse. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. That about wraps up the 9.2 Affliction, I guess, Warlock feedback video. Now, number one, before I get too far into the actual outro here, I didn't mention as much as I wanted to. I mentioned a decent bit, but like I want to drive this point home that like still Dark Lair hits like a wet noodle, and if almost nothing else changes, I just want Dark Lair to be a little more relevant. Maybe have it AoE on targets that have agony on them, do more damage to my UA target, right? Sort of like a weird contagion, kind of like middle ground there. I really want Dark Lair to do more damage, and once again, the corrupting Leer suggestion I think goes a long way, but regardless, I think that needs to be addressed somehow. So besides that though, like AF going into this tier, I guess going into next tier, depending on how the fights and things shake out, right? I read over a handful of them. Some fights, I think a decent bit of fights, depending on how good AF single target shakes out, AF could be pretty good. I feel like as far as AF, Demo, and Destro are all concerned, Affliction's tier bonus probably is most relevant, I feel like, addressing the actual issues the spec has. And when it comes to double legendaries, DSS is very good in AoE, obviously, like stacked AoE. But even in single target, like Affliction's like one of the better specs in the game to give power infusion to. I think it's like 5th best, give or take, depending what you're looking at and stuff like that. Demo obviously being better, but the actual haste amp is multiplicative. And with Lust and things, playing DSS, you still get an insane amount of haste, right? Now, Demo will play DSS, I would assume, too, if you're playing Night Fae. But still, there's a lot of potential for AF next tier. And double legendary combinations do favor, I think, favor AF a good bit as well, compared to maybe Demo and I would say Destro by a decent bit. So, with all that being said, though, let me know what you guys think of these suggestions, changes, and I guess just overall summary of AF heading into 9.2 PTR. Once again, we haven't seen any class tuning, no legendary tuning, no covenant tuning, we haven't seen any tuning at all. So a handful of these changes could very well already be in game, or things could already be addressed through different means. I assume next week, whenever we get PTR, I'm guessing like Tuesday or Wednesday, because once again, Blizzard's on vacation this week for Thanksgiving. We probably will start some class tuning, maybe in the first build of 9.2, if not second build. But I wanted to get all these videos rolling out. And yeah, so once again, let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section about these suggested changes. If you guys have any that I missed or think would be good, feel free to drop them down there as well. I will be sure to get back to you. So any weak course profiles or add-ons you see here, once again, you can get off for free on my Twitch. Want to swing by, hang out, ask me a question anytime, feel free to do so. Also, one more massive shout out on my patrons. Thank you a million times, guys, for all support. Heads up, the tier 3 Felgar rank on my Patreon does indeed get early access to the Warlock 9.2 spreadsheet, which should be going up very soon. Whenever PTR essentially drops, I have some things to put on it already, but I'm sort of waiting for PTR to get it, I guess that ball rolling completely with raid testing and things like that. Thanks again for watching, guys. If you're new to the channel and want to see more WoW content, be sure to smash the sub button below and the like button right down as well. Helps out a ton. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.